meeting of Committee of the Whole, which I will now call to order. Mr. Clerk, please show for the record of this meeting that Mayor Haxon is absent with notice, and I, in the position of acting mayor, will be chairing this meeting in her absence. Are there any declarations of interest from Council? Seeing none, I will move to our land acknowledgement statement. The town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and acknowledges the lands originally used and occupied by the First Peoples of the Williams Treaties, First Nations, and other Indigenous peoples, and on behalf of Council, I thank them for sharing this land. We also acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as EG's closest First Nation community and recognize the unique relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and we join them in these responsibilities. Community announcements. I will begin with the following. On the evening of April 15th, we will be celebrating our volunteers with our annual Volunteer Appreciation event. If you are an EG community volunteer, please join us. Advanced registration is required. The month of April is Earth Month, and we will be hosting environmental events the weekend of April 20th, starting with an eco fair at the sports complex at 11 a.m. and a community cleanup on Sunday the 21st, also beginning at 11 a.m. More information can be found on the town's website. On April 21st at 1 p.m., cheer on our emergency services team for their charity hockey game and support our Youth and Community Initiatives Fund. And a reminder of the South Lake Run on Sunday, April 28th. Please consider joining or donating to Team EG. Are there any announcements from Council? Thank you. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I just have two. On Thursday, April 11th, we have in Ward 3, so for you, Acting Mayor, and myself, we have Coffee with Council. It's our open house to meet with members of our ward, and we will have a special guest, Officer Wojo from York Regional Police will be there to talk about community safety. As well, on April 20th, from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., we have the North Union Pancake Breakfast. And so if people would like to come to that, we'd love to have you, and it'll be good. No one goes away hungry. Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor.
Looking forward to it. Are there any other announcements from council members? Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. On April 19th, we're hosting our first ever teen night, sponsored by the Youth Advisory Committee. So join us at the East Gwillimbury Sports Complex for a night of fun, pizza, games, be a photo booth, there'll be crafts and sports. You can register on the East Gwillimbury website, and that's on April 19th from 5:30 to 8:30. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Johns?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to use this opportunity, since I first got elected, I think it's been about a year and a half now, I've never received so many engagement touch points, I will say, with residents. So I'd like to use this time for the community announcements to talk about the clear cutting that occurred on 18816 Leslie Street, which I find absolutely disgusting, as with many of the residents that have reached out to me, and I'm sure as Councillor Roy-DiClemente. And so I just wanted to give an update to my announcement that there is no active application on this site. It is owned by Sundial Homes.
Excuse me, Councillor Johns?
Yep.
Councillor Johns, I think that might be an appropriate discussion at another time. I'd like to focus on the community announcements, and we can take up other issues at an appropriate time in the agenda. Not
looking for a discussion. I'm just finishing my announcement. So just two other points. Staff have followed up in the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Area. They are conducting an investigation, and York Region Forestry are also conducting an investigation. So I just wanted to update the residents with that announcement. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Johns, we will discuss this further at the appropriate time, but thank you very much for all of the community announcements, and there's a lot going on in our community, and we look forward to seeing you at our town events. And so, members of council, noting on the agenda, we have a presentation today. I'm seeking your approval to move this item forward to be dealt with before deputations. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Crone. All in favor? to move the presentation for the honorary fire chief to before the discussion of the other deputations? Okay, well, let's try that again. Okay, so before, we are going to have a presentation today for the honorary fire chief, and I would like to move that up on the agenda. So I'm seeking your approval to move this item forward to be dealt with before deputations. Can I have movers, please? We have Councillor Crone, and all in favor? Thank you very much. The motion is carried. So thank you. I will now move to item F, presentations. And council today is recognizing the honorary fire chief for the day. And can I have a mover for this, please? Thank you, Councillor Foster. So be it resolved, moved by Councillor Foster, be it resolved that council recognize the honorary fire chief for the day. Fire Chief Brassard, would you like to speak to this exciting initiative?
It is an exciting initiative. Your worship, thank you for
Your microphone.
the introduction. There we go. Wrong button.
Okay.
So thank you for that introduction. It is an exciting day to welcome perhaps one of the youngest firefighters on our roster, even if it's just for the day. I'll turn the mic over to Fire Prevention Officer Shauna, who can carry on with the introduction, but it's a pleasure to be here with him today, so thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, Council, Madam Mayor, Acting Madam Mayor. Chief for the Day. Chief for the Day is a program that we run in December each year, reaching out to our young East Gwillimbury residents between the grades of 7 and 8. This is an opportunity for a student to be recognized for doing a random act of kindness without being prompted for their chance to become East Gwillimbury's Fire and Emergency Services Chief for the Day. This rare opportunity gives our junior fire chief a hands-on experience of what it's like to be a chief for the day. This year's recipient for Fire Chief for the Day is John. John is a grade 7 student from Our Lady of Good Counsel. He was nominated by his mother, Michelle. John goes out of his way to compliment strangers and to try to make them smile. John and his brother took it upon themselves to set up a booth at a car show where they sold water and pop to the participants. Half of the proceeds were to be donated to sick kids to purchase toys for children, and John was to keep the other half for himself. After working an 8-hour day, John made the decision for all of the proceeds, that there weren't enough for just half of the proceeds, and decided to donate every single dollar that he earned to sick kids. This desire to help others is not something that is an opportunity for him. When he was 7, John saved up all his money for many months and donated it to Southlake for those who were suffering from cancer. As you can see, these are some of the random acts of kindness that John does without looking for anything in return. These attributes are what we look for in a student to become the chief for the day. John is an excellent example of fire ambassador for the town of East Gwillimbury, and we have no doubt that he will continue to represent East Gwillimbury very well. Please welcome Fire Chief John.
Good morning, Council. My name is John, and I live in Sharon, East Gwillimbury, and I go to OLGC. It's not too far from here. Thank you all for selecting me to be Fire Chief for the day. It is a very exciting opportunity and something that I will always remember. I was nominated because I like to do many good things without looking for anything in return, and that's what the nomination was looking for. I like to help people and make them smile because it makes me feel good. I can't wait to learn all about what the fire department does daily. East Gwillimbury has 3 fire departments that I will get to visit today. One in Holland Landing, one in Queensville, and one in Mount Albert. East Gwillimbury covers 238 square kilometers, and when you think about it, that's a lot of area to cover. I've been to open houses at the fire station in the past, but today's experience will be on a whole new level. Our fire department focuses on 3 lines of defense. The first is education. I think education about fire safety is important. They spread the words through schools and, town events like farmers markets. People don't always think about stuff like smoke alarms or carbon monoxide alarms, or if they have an escape plan in case the house catches on fire. The inside of our gas oven caught fire once, and my dad didn't tell my mom about a spill in the oven, and that's how it caught fire. As soon as the alarm went off, me and my brother ran out of the house immediately onto the front lawn by the road. It was winter, and we were in shorts and a t-shirt. We clearly did have the discussion in our home on what to do if you hear an alarm. Not responding quickly could result in injuries. Like the saying goes, knowledge is power. The second line is enforcement and prevention. They identify possible risks and remove them. So after the oven fire, a fireman did come to the house to make sure we had an appropriate number of smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms in the house. They also enforce fire code regulations and complete fire investigations. The last line is called suppression, meaning they respond to emergency incidents like car crashes. It's not just burning buildings or fire emergencies. They also respond to like medical emergencies and much more. Thank you all for this opportunity, and I look forward to enjoying the rest of my day continuing to push fire safety.
Thank you very much, Honorary Fire Chief John. You did an excellent job and were well served in your capacity as Honorary Fire Chief. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from Council for Fire Chief Broussard? Yes, Councillor Foster?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Not a question, just a comment. John, I spent a long time wearing one of those uniforms, and for somebody like you who is community-minded, you're with the right people today. So ask lots of questions, for sure. They have the answers. So most of the answers, let's go with that.
Any other questions from Council? If not, all in favor of the recommendation? Very good. That motion is carried. And we will now have a brief recess to take a photo with our Honorary Fire Chief John. Can I have a mover for the recess, please? Councillor Crone, thank you. So if I can invite everybody, including Council, into the hallways, and we'll take some photos with Honorary Fire Chief John. Thank you very much. We are back now. We are now at item E, deputations. I'd like to invite Mr. Ian Andres on behalf of Acorn Development Corporation, who is making a deputation to committee regarding item G.2, Development Services, Planning Branch Report DS2024-10, intention to designate under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, 18490 Leslie Street. Can I have a mover for the recommendation as presented in the agenda? Thank you, Councillor Crone. And so we shall proceed with the deputation, correct? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Madam Acting Mayor and members of council. Thank you for having me this morning. My name is Ian Andres. I'm a lawyer with Goodmans in Toronto, and I'm here today on behalf of the Acorn Development Corporation, which is the owner of the property known municipally as 18490 Leslie Street. It's item G2 on the agenda that I'll be speaking to. This property is on the west side of Leslie, just south of here and just south of Manorhampton Street. And together with a small adjacent property known as 18508 Leslie Street, the two properties together comprise a development site of about 1 hectare in size. The subject property is the most easterly block on a larger 26-hectare landholding that received zoning and site plan, sorry, not site plan, zoning and draft plan of subdivision approval in 2015. The approved draft plan contemplated the subject property being developed as a medium-density development block. At the time, it was contemplated to have 34 units. That's since been increased in the more recent site plan application. And over the course of the last 8 or 9 years, there's been 128 units already built in this plan of subdivision to the west. The shape and configuration of the subject property is a bit challenging, so Acorn subsequently acquired the small adjacent property that I mentioned a moment ago, and it was rezoned last year in 2023 to match the 2015 zoning of the rest of the subject property. Acorn also filed a site plan application in October 2021. That's been circulating through the town for about 2.5 years. And the proposed development that's shown in that site plan application is a 65-unit stacked townhouse development organized in 4 blocks of stacked townhouses around an internal private road network. And the processing of that application is nearing completion. There's just a few technical items yet to be resolved, and we anticipate a site plan agreement would be ready shortly. What's proposed for this property is important missing middle housing. The type of product contemplated here is not common in East Gwillimbury as of yet with the stacked townhouses. They're a more attainable product than a lot of the housing you see on the market. They're obviously smaller than single-family detached homes, but also larger than typical apartment units. So each stacked townhouse unit is around 1,200 square feet. We see it as a bit of the Goldilocks sweet spot in terms of attainability. Acorn is also willing to explore some aspect of this development as rental housing. It's still early in that discussion, but I just wanted to mention that. So while Acorn is known that the old farmhouse at 18490 Leslie has been on the town's heritage register for some time, at no time over the last 9 or 10 years, while these planning approvals made their way forward, has the town taken any steps to designate the property as having cultural heritage value under the OHA. And in the meantime, as you can appreciate, Acorn has spent a considerable amount of money, hundreds of thousands, advancing its planning approvals for this subdivision and for the site plan application for the subject property. You may know that the recent amendments to the Planning Act actually prohibit municipalities from designating properties late in the planning approval cycle. Once rezoning applications are in, there's a 90-day window that starts ticking. That doesn't apply here because our site plan application is a couple of years old, so the transition doesn't capture us. But I just wanted to mention that because the Planning Act has been revised to avoid these kind of late in the day heritage designations, because it's just not fair for applicants to have to deal with the heritage designation at the 11th hour once they're close to getting their final site plan approval. So I wrote to council on February 13th, as you probably know, to address 2 purposes. The first is the formal notice of Acorn's intention to demolish the old farmhouse, and the second was to request sanitary servicing allocation. I understand the allocation request, the town wants to deal with that at a later date, which is okay, that still stands, but I'll focus on the heritage today. The old farmhouse is in very rough shape. It has only marginal heritage value in our estimation. It's been substantially altered over the years. Many of its original details have been significantly damaged. The rear extension's in very poor condition with no architectural value, and the house is structurally compromised. There's visible cracks in the foundation and a deteriorating load-bearing wall and extensive water damage. As you're well aware, the town is undertaking the Sharon HCD study, which is proceeding for this segment of Leslie Street. It's our understanding that the consultant's recommending the southerly boundary of the HCD area stop north of Manorhampton Street so that it would not capture the subject property. And while it's of course within the town's jurisdiction to consider a Part 4 designation for the subject property, it would be a little odd, I submit respectfully, to have a Part 4 designation just south of where the formal heritage district stops. And effectively, the purpose of that here would be to prevent the redevelopment of this property, which is very far advanced in the site plan process. We disagree respectfully with the conclusion in the town's Heritage Committee recommendation that this property meets the criteria for designation. We say it only has marginal heritage value. There are far better examples of heritage properties in Sharon and elsewhere. If council decides to pursue a heritage designation, Acorn will have no choice but to object to that designation, and ultimately that will likely lead to an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal. That's not the way we want it to play out, but we're just being transparent here. One last thing I want to say is the report is somewhat glaring in its omission of the consequences of a heritage designation here. It would not just be to deal with this old farmhouse, but if the old farmhouse has to be conserved on the subject property where it stands, effectively that sterilizes the subject property and prevents it from being redeveloped. Because given the house location within the property and its size and surrounding area that would have to go along with it, it would not be practical or feasible to build townhouses on the subject property, to have a proper functioning road network while still retain that building. And while we had initially contemplated moving it off-site, that can be disproportionately expensive to the overall project. So what I really want to say today is the town has a choice to make here, and one choice would be to pursue the designation process, which Acorn does not want to happen. The other choice would be to allow the site plan process to come to completion and allow Acorn to deliver 65 new attainable housing units. In the midst of a housing crisis, the town will be electing to provide 65 new homes to families as opposed to salvaging one old rundown 160-year-old, 1.5-story-old farmhouse. And the trunk sewer extension, which Acorn has been working on diligently with other landowners in the community, is still a ways away. But if the town were to see fit to provide allocation, then this property could move forward quite quickly. And then lastly, on top of that, Acorn has offered, as I mentioned in my letter, to make a financial contribution to the town's heritage initiatives. However, the town would choose to spend that money, and we're certainly open to a further discussion about that, and we think that would be a better use of heritage resources than trying to salvage this old farmhouse. So thank you for your attention, and we respectfully request that council not follow the recommendation from Heritage Committee and instead accept Acorn's request to demolish the existing building. And just to be clear, Acorn is not looking to immediately demolish the building. There is a tenant in the building today, and certainly Acorn will be willing to let that tenant stay there until the property is ready to move forward. But what we can't have is the uncertainty of whether this building is going to have to be kept in situ, because Acorn's spending a lot of money advancing its site plan application, and it's just time to bring this to a conclusion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your deputation, Mr. Andres. Are there any questions from council for our deputant, keeping in mind that we will be discussing this item further in item G1? So G2, pardon me. So are there any councillors with questions? Yes, Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just one question, and then I'll hold the rest of them for the other portion. Just at the end, you moved through quickly. You talked about allocation, and you said if the town was to grant allocation, we can move forward quickly. I thought you already had allocation.
Not for this site, no.
So
There's 65 units requiring allocation.
So are you part of the Sharon Landowners Group?
Yes, but do you mind if Mr. Barkey answers that question?
Sure, I'm just looking for an answer if there's allocation, so, yeah.
The answer is no to that question, as I understand it.
No, that, Councillor Johns, through you, Madam Chair. We are part of the White Belt Group, but that is a totally different area. The town has brought it into the urban area, but our draft plan that we are talking about today was in the urban boundary, it has been for a number of years. So I don't see how the two relate as far as allocation. There's no allocation yet for White Belt. And
I said the Sharon Landowners Group. My apologies. You had just said if we grant allocation from the town. I was under the impression you had allocation. So that's what I just wanted clarity. So
no. So what Mr. Andres is speaking to is our request to for the town to provide some allocation from your reserve.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barkey, for that clarification. And Councillor Roy-DiClemente, yes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some technical difficulties here. So I guess my question through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Andres is, given that you don't have allocation and given that you have a tenant in the building and your work is not imminent and you don't have an approved site plan and so on, why now? Why are you looking to have this? And in fact, why are you not simply seeking to have the property removed from the heritage list rather than a demolition permit?
It's a good question. Thank you. Through you, Madam Acting Mayor. The main reason why we're bringing this forward now is for the certainty, because the site plan application is on the 1 yard line, so to speak. There are a couple technical details that have to be finalized, and then a site plan agreement would be able to be signed. But for Acorn to do that, signing a site plan agreement effectively means that the property is ready to move on to building permit, but for this outstanding heritage issue. So the request to demolish is really to get confirmation that the town is not going to stand in the way of a demolition. It's not to bring a bulldozer to the property tomorrow or next week or next month even. But we need that certainty as to avoid this cloud hanging over. And so when I mentioned the Planning Act amendments earlier, the government has recently changed the act such that when there's a planning application moving forward, the municipality basically has to decide within 90 days of the application coming in whether they're going to move to Designate, as you probably know. Again, that doesn't strictly speaking apply to us because we predate those amendments, but the principle is the same, and the reason the government made that change is the same, because owners, applicants need to understand whether they're going to be faced with this significant heritage issue at the end of the process, and it's very difficult to take the rest of the planning approvals through to completion while that, I call it a cloud, I don't mean to be disparaging by saying that, but while that uncertainty or that unknown is still out there. So that's the main reason. It's, again, not to bring a bulldozer to the property imminently. Having said that, if allocation was granted by the town, Acorn is ready, willing, and able to move forward with this development and deliver this housing as quickly as possible.
So during our council deliberations, whenever this application has come before us, questions have been raised about the house, and up until your letter of the 13th of February, it was the municipality's understanding that relocation and restoration were still on the table. And so I would argue that the 11th hour hadn't yet arrived until you wrote that letter for us, because it was under our understanding that that was still a matter to be addressed in a collaborative fashion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I would like to, are there any other questions before I make a comment and we move on? Yes, Councillor Foster. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sitting here listening and I'm hearing things like the 11th hour, which makes me think that somehow it seems like we're to blame for this. How long has Acorn owned the property?
2011.
So that house was on the heritage list then. So I'm just thinking that I could take the other side here and say, you've waited for the 11th hour, not necessarily us. So I'm just wondering if there's a reason for that, or just how that works out.
Well, through you, Madam Acting Mayor, I'm certainly not trying to pick a fight with the council as to who's to blame here, and I'm not suggesting that the town's to blame. When I say the 11th hour, I mean we're at the 1 yard line, not to mix metaphors, on the site plan application. And while my understanding is consistent with what Councillor Roy-DiClemente said, that there has been some discussion about potentially relocating the building, my understanding is also that those discussions, have not as of yet resulted in any agreement. And the more Acorn thinks about the prospect of relocating this house to another lot within its subdivision to the west, the more impractical that solution becomes. And if the town were interested in the building being relocated to another site, I've heard the Sharon Temple site mentioned in the past, that's something we might be willing to consider as well. So it's not that all considerations are necessarily off the table, but yes, the property's been on the Heritage Register, but the town has not taken any steps to designate the property. It could have done that in 2011, it could have done that in 2015, it could have done that in 2023. The onus is not on Acorn to bring that forward when Acorn believes that the property doesn't warrant designation. So, plus there's been the HCD study that's happening. So again, I'm not trying to cast aspersions, but the reality is Acorn needs the certainty of whether this house has to stay on the property or not, and if the town's interest or position is that it should stay on the property, then there will be a further process that has to play out there. But it's not it's not that we're saying, town, you've waited so long and, you know, we've been treated unfairly. I realize I did use the word unfair, but I meant that more generically in the sense that Acorn needs the certainty. This decision needs to be made. It can't just hang out there for another couple of years, you know, while site plan agreement is finalized.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Yes, Councillor Carruthers for the deputant.
Thank you. We are awaiting our heritage review, as well as we have a draft tree protection bylaw coming into play shortly. And so I think it's not about waiting to the 11th hour. It's about us making sure that we have all the correct policies in place before something is removed. And to me, I care about the trees on the property as well. Once they're chopped down, once the house is demolished, those things don't come back again. So given that the timing on this, you have a tenant right now, you have no allocation. Last we've heard, we have no allocation to give at this point, so it could be years and years waiting. So I just trying to understand where the disconnect is with the timing, where the town is seeing that this is not an immediate need, that we need to be moving forward with this because we don't have the allocation. And we have these substantial policies that are coming forward. And you seem to think that this needs to be done right away. I don't think we're at the 11th hour. I think that we are in the process of making sure that we know exactly what our policies are, so we're fair to everyone. When you use the term unfair, I think we are trying to be as fair as possible to make sure everyone is seen through the same lens. Thank you.
Any questions, further questions from council before we move on to the next portion of the agenda, where we can discuss in a more fulsome manner all of the details regarding this deputation? Seeing no further questions, all in favor of the motion? Thank you very much. The motion is carried, and we are now at the...
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andres, for your deputation. We are now at the Development Services portion of the agenda with Councillor Roy-DiClemente in the chair.
Sorry, I'm using the microphone on the left side, and I'm left-handed, so that's challenging for me. So I need an accommodation. Development Services, we have a couple of items on our agenda this morning. The first one is a temporary use zoning bylaw amendment for 30 Orchard Court. Ms. Bégin, did you have anything further to add to your presentation here?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. No, I think it's self-explanatory. I'm certainly available to answer any questions that members of council may have, but this is a temporary use zoning bylaw amendment to extend use for an accessory dwelling for a period of 20 years as per the legislation.
May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Crone. Any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's very important that we support this because it is our official plan. Once approved by the region, it's actually going to allow these sorts of things. So this is really just housekeeping matter, and it's unfortunate that the applicants got snarled up in the process of approving official plans. But the one thing I would like to maybe suggest is that we take this and move approval in today's later council meeting, so that we can shorten the waiting period by about 2 weeks for our next council meeting. So if we could accommodate that today, I think that would be a nice gesture to the applicants who have waited far too long for this to happen, if you'd entertain that.
Staff, do we anticipate any issues with a same-day ratification of this?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, we don't anticipate
Okay,
any
so
issue.
we'll add to that resolution that that this also be considered at our meeting later today. You've noted that, Mr. Clerk? Awesome. All right, so seeing no further discussion, we have a motion on the table as amended by Councillor Crone. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, the next item on our agenda is item number 2, a planning services report regarding intention to designate under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act at 18490 Leslie Street. May I have a mover for this? Moved by Councillor Carruthers. Ms. Bégin, would you care to kick off the discussion for us, please?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I think this is actually a a good news story in that it's a tool that can be employed by council to provide opportunity to really review the benefits of designation. What we're speaking about today is moving forward with a notice of intention to designate. With respect to some of the concerns around timing, as noted by you, Madam Chair, it was staff's understanding up until the receipt of the notice of intention to demolish, and as evidenced in the heritage impact assessment attached to this report, that we were looking at options to work collaboratively towards potential relocation and restoration. And I note that, as was also mentioned, that we've just launched the heritage strategy work, so that will give council an opportunity to be able to define what their priorities are, what resource allocations are appropriate for heritage, that type of thing. So essentially what this does is it initiates a process that gives council that window of time to consider. At a very high level, once a notice of intention to designate is made and published, the property owner has a period of 30 days to respond. I think there was a reference to going to the Ontario Land Tribunal. That would be a few steps down the road. There is another step. Should the property owner object to council's intention to designate, then council has a further period of time to engage the appropriate expertise to make, to substantiate or make the case for designation. And then it becomes, if council wishes to pursue that and make that investment in building the case. But the other side of that is that it does allow for this heritage strategy process to progress concurrently, which we hope will give staff and members of council a better understanding about what are the priorities in terms of which buildings that we really absolutely want to protect. We recognize that there are heritage properties that are owned by people who are amenable to the designation process, and so that's really not at issue here. It's sort of understanding. If we feel strongly that there's a community benefit to protecting certain properties, what are we willing and able to do about that? So happy to entertain any questions that council may have about this, or provide any context that council may feel is necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Bégin. I'll start with one. The draft study for the Heritage Conservation District was referenced that the zone had been moved further north towards Manor Hampton. But as I understand it, both Walnut Farm and the property in question were flagged for individual designation and not necessarily as inclusion into the Heritage District as a whole. Is that the case?
Yes, that's correct through you, Madam Chair. They were flagged as having significance to be worthy of consideration for designation. Again, in terms of any question with respect to timeline, it was, as you noted, up until February, it was our understanding that we were working toward a collaborative process. So filing an intention to designate didn't really seem warranted at that time. But this is a standard response under the Ontario Heritage Act, should council wish to create that opportunity to assess further.
And if I may further, Ms. Bégin, if one were to designate, traditionally it encompasses the entire property. However, a designation bylaw that's passed by this council could get creative and say it is only the house and the 100 by 100 feet around it, or they can allow for the house to move to another location. I know another designated property was allowed to had to stay on the property, but could be moved anywhere on that land. So that's still the case. So we can get creative here. We don't necessarily have to sterilize the entire property while we're exploring this.
That's correct, through you, Madam Chair. While the designation would add requirements around obtaining a heritage permit to undertake any substantive changes, that permit could allow for developing the surrounding land. So it's not the intent of staff to
in any way sterilize this property or prevent development, but this is the only tool we have to ensure that we have the ability to really fully assess the property's value and determine what what council believes is the appropriate investment into maintaining that property. And I think conversely, if it were to be without this tool, while I certainly appreciate the property owner's assertion that it wouldn't be demolished, we would have no ability to prevent that should the situation change.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion from Councillor Carruthers on the table. I've asked a couple of questions to try and set the stage a little bit. Members of committee, any questions or just points of discussion? Councillor Lahey, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So I would like to clarify for everyone and affirm that my understanding is correct, is that if we hypothetically approve the recommendations before us today, provided by staff, that it does not guarantee that it will be designated. It simply provides more time to pursue discussions with the developer and have a more detailed review.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. It does not assure designation. It is the initiation of a process. And as I mentioned, one potential outcome is that the property owner might object, and then council would have a further opportunity to consider their next steps, should they wish to continue to pursue it.
Yes.
So this is really just the start.
And further through you, Madam Chair. So again, so that I understand clearly, that there is 30 days to file a notice of objection, and then an additional 90 days following the end of that 30-day period for council to reconsider and potentially withdraw the notice of intention to designate or pursue a collaborative discussion to find a mutually beneficial resolution to the situation. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Foster, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments about this, and I hope that the developer understands that we're in the midst of a Heritage Conservation District study, and it kind of leaves our hands tied, as far as I'm concerned, as a council, to decide that we may be looking at a Heritage Conservation District basically a stone's throw away from this property, and be willing to just kind of throw this one away to a demolition permit. So I think there needs to be some more thought put into this, whether it is striking a deal, whether it's the pulling of the demolition notice. At this point, I don't know, but you know, it's across the road from the Sharon burying ground. It's across the road from Walnut Farm. It's been part of the streetscape for decades in the establishment of Sharon. You know, it's all kind of important. And it was brought up to me, it was put this way. So I should mention that we have Jan Wolf and Gary Gugino here from our Heritage Advisory Committee. And this one brought up a lot of conversation in our meetings, as you can imagine. So Jan Wolf, our chair, was actually getting herself ready to speak today, and I guess I can take some of the blame that we didn't get the deputation form in early enough. But anyway, Jan made a statement, and I think this is taken right off of our website, that we in EG talk of a balanced community made up of several urban areas and villages made up of farms, forests, etc. This certainly fits that bill. So I think it's worthwhile that we look at. Something else that might be a little bit off the table here a little bit, but Morton Stables has been there for, I believe, around 40 years or maybe a touch more. They are they're known worldwide for what they do. So I could make an argument saying that they're part of East Bloomberry's heritage after 40 years, and it's still on that same property. So I think that kind of strengthens us a little bit too. So, and the other thing that I think is worth mentioning, there's a reference in the letter to a precedent being set about taking a payment for other properties that have been demolished. And I think that we have to be careful to understand that we are not comparing apples to apples on this particular one. And I mean, I have more information about that, but I won't make this any longer. But, you know, this is a piece of property that's been sitting there for all these years, and it's a respected part of the historic landscape of Sharon. And I think we have to take a long, hard look at that when we're making our decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Anything further? Councillor Crone?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really don't like it when we get these applications put towards us. It's never an easy decision, and I guess that's why we get elected, to make the hard decisions. But we've got a hard-working Heritage Committee that's making their recommendations, and we have an applicant that sees things differently. I read the report, and I was very tickled to hear that they were the family that was involved with baking, and my family has, I spent my teenage years in a bakery, so I know just how essential bakers are to community building. You don't do anything on an empty stomach. So I think that's nice and certainly noteworthy. It would be great, you know, we've had applicants here before that have heritage properties, and they embrace it, and they want to do everything they can to support it. It was a few weeks ago that we designated one, thankfully, and we love to see that. But we've got this one where the people really don't have that same interest for their various reasons. I certainly think it's worthwhile having further discussions to see what we can do. So if we can look for that compromise and both sides can walk away feeling that they got something, I think that would be of value. I think if the Heritage Committee is you know, says this is worth hanging on to, and I think there's some members up here that feel the same, I think we owe it to ourselves to try and exhaust any chance to see what we can do to accommodate, and so that we're not with the landowner, that they can live with that as well. I fundamentally have challenges when we try and force a designation on an unwilling body, whether it would be a private resident or a developer. And I know it's easy to kick at developers because they're big and, you know, lots of money and, you know, all that. But it would be any different if we were doing it to a private resident that didn't want it. So I would suggest we try and negotiate something to see if we can get that great East Gwillimbury compromise that would make everyone happy. If I think in my mind, if this does go to the Ontario Land Tribunal, knowing what the climate is today with the urgency around more housing, and knowing that the panel members are all provincial appointees, I think that gives a certain, if we go to the OLT, we lose all control. And so, again, I'm just putting in the urgency for negotiation. My question, Madam Chair, is to Ms. Béjean. What sort of hard timelines do we have right now that we have to be mindful of that might impact our decision?
Through you, Madam Chair, and with respect to the notice of intention to demolish, that 60-day period would expire on April 13th. And then the notice of, but if council decides that they wish to pursue a notice of intention to designate, that stops that clock effectively, if you will, and then the applicant would have a further 30 days to respond to that, and then 90 days beyond that. So I did want to, just for context, sort of touch back to that, the work that is going on building a comprehensive municipal heritage strategy. So one of the questions, for example, would be, we're anticipating that, you know, council will have an opportunity to prioritize, and what the question that hasn't been asked yet is this the best example of the Gothic revival style? Do we have better examples that council is more invested in protecting? And we haven't had that conversation yet. So I think that having some time to consider questions like that is really critical to heritage conservation.
Go ahead. Actually, Councillor Carruthers had her hand up first, and then you, Councillor Lahey.
Thank you very much. I think this council, and the last term as well, we've spent countless hours debating these one-offs. And I've been pressing for this heritage study, and I know we're working on it. And I think we're seeing now what happens when we delay things like that it must be very frustrating to the landowners. I hear my fellow councillors' comments, and I don't want to negotiate. I want to just pause what's happening so that we can get a strategy that we apply to everything, and that is fair and consistent. I don't want to be negotiating over, you can tear down a heritage building if you give us some money. I mean, that's not the position I think that looks very good on council. I want to have a fair and consistent policy. So my question to staff is, when will we have that policy? And to me, in keeping with that is the natural heritage that's on the property, which is the trees. When will our tree preservation bylaw come into effect as well?
Through you, Madam Chair, I can answer the first part of that question. You will be contacted shortly by the consultant that's been engaged to craft the strategy for some preliminary interviews in advance of the May 14th workshop. We anticipate that workshop will be structured in a similar way to the municipal strategic plan workshop was, in order to be able to drill down into priorities, tactics, and resources that council feels are appropriate in managing heritage going forward. I would defer to my colleague, Mr. Karmazin, to answer the second part of that question.
Mr. Karmazin?
Through you, Madam Chair, we are completing the public consultation process related to the draft tree preservation bylaw. We hosted public meetings within each community, and we're now in the final stages of doing some outreach as well as consultation with some residents and businesses that have provided comments related to the bylaw. Our hope is to report back to council in the spring for potential adoption of the bylaw and to move forward in the spring.
Thank you. We are currently in the spring. This spring, you're talking about?
Through you, Madam Chair, in May, we've identified a potential report back in May of 2024, spring 2024.
Okay, thank you.
So before Canada Day.
This has been ongoing for a while, so I just needed to check. I really do appreciate that we do lots of public consultation, but sometimes it feels like we're waiting forever when it's so urgent that we get some these things in place. So I do think that we should not be negotiating. We need to press pause on this. We need to get our policies in place and then move forward from there in a consistent way. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Go ahead, Councillor Lahey.
Thank you very much. One last question. Timing is everything in life, obviously. And I have learned as being a councillor that there's often more than even two perspectives on a particular unique situation. There can be 3, 4, and multiple more. So I would prefer to build on the comments made by my fellow councillor, Councillor Crone, in terms of continuing the discussions in a collaborative way with the developer, particularly because it was only last week that I became aware of the February 13th letter of intention to demolish that was received by the town, and only yesterday that after requesting a copy of the archaeological consultation report, that I received that report in the afternoon, and it was shared with our fellow council members. So that report is 50 pages long. That was prepared for the Heritage Impact Assessment, and so I would benefit from, in order to make the most informed decisions, time to review those reports again in a more fulsome manner. And so I would like to respectfully suggest a friendly amendment to the resolutions and recommendations that we have before us today, that we add that we direct staff to immediately initiate further discussions to continue the conversation with the property owner.
Councillor Carruthers, it's your motion.
I think that's implied in the motion that staff will continue to discuss with them. I don't want to add that to my motion. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion?
May I? Well, I think it's always good to have it in writing, that we direct the staff to continue those discussions.
The notice of intent provides for 30 days to respond. There is a call and answer process here, 30 days, then 90 days. There is a discussion that needs to take place, evidently.
Very good. Then I would be happy to second Councillor Carruthers' motion.
Thank you. We are in committee, so I don't know if we need a seconder, but I'm happy to hear that you're going to be supporting it. Is there any further discussion on the motion as presented? Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say one last thing, like the comment that Councillor Lahey made about being collaborative. I think that that is the spirit in which I think that we need to be bringing to solve this. Like sometimes in these situations, one person can say one thing in a certain way, and then it heightens and it goes to a different connotation, and then somebody says something else, and then now we've arrived at intention to demolish, and now equal and opposite reaction is intent to designate, and it would be great if we could catch our breath and think about collaborative efforts and think about the larger plan as Councillor Carruthers is calling out, because like developers need a mandate and or a playing field in which they can operate, because they need certainty as what's being called out, and they need clarity on that. But at the same time, we behind the dais, we need clarity on what we're making decisions. I've heard numerous people, the heritage study, a different report, a different opinion. But it's reached a critical point where it's like, make a decision, but we need the framework. And so intent to demolish, intent to designate is what's sitting before us, and hopefully that facilitates a conversation. I will just say one last thing. In the backdrop of how I opened up about community announcements, the fact is that whether it is right or not, the folks in the community are seeing a clear-cutting mentality to the opportunity of growth. And I'm not saying that is this proponent's mentality, but the challenge is it gets grouped together when we are heritage study, tree bylaw, again, maybe equal, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. The fact is that we as residents who have called this place home, I just will make a call out that the proponent made the comment, yeah, it was a nice drive coming up from the city. I'm a lawyer in the city, coming up from the city. Okay, we're only like 38 minutes out. We're not like, so we're here in this community, and this is ours to work and protect. And so to see that occurring and then have this come up, intent to demolish, it's a lot for us to digest when we are looking to respect our past and protect our future. So I'm going to be voting in favor, as it is an intent to designate in response to intent to demolish, and then hoping that we can work collaboratively with the opportunity to build that framework in place, as my other councillors have mentioned, and be able to come to an opportunity to move forward that works for everyone. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I hope that the message has been clear here, is that Council wants to work with the proponent, and ultimately the best outcome would be for the intent to demolish to be withdrawn and for discussion to be taken place. And I think, to Councillor Lahey's point, that's what we'd like to see. But unfortunately, if our cards are called, you have to put a card down. And I think that's where we're sitting at this point. So, ultimately, if the intent to demolish were withdrawn and the conversation could continue, that's also a good outcome. Ms. Bégin, I noticed that you had indicated you wanted to speak. Is there anything further?
Oh, just through you, Madam Chair, just to add that, we did, just to confirm, staff did outreach as soon as we received that, and recognized that Acorn has been a respected and collaborative partner in our development in East Gwillimbury, and so we're happy to continue those conversations.
Certainly. Okay. So seeing no further discussion, we have a motion on the table from Councillor Carruthers as presented. All those in favor? Opposed? And that motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. So that is the end of the discussion here. Ms. Bégin, do you have anything further to add?
Through you, Madam Chair, I do have a brief verbal update to advise council that we were approached by York Region about making a joint application together with Aurora and Newmarket for under the Housing Enabling Water System Fund. So we are going to proceed with making that application to support, if successful, a section of the North YDSS expansion. And I'm happy to say that our involvement, other than sort of expressing a willingness to collaborate, is really just that. The region is taking on the bulk of the preparation of the application, and if successful, and it depends on Newmarket's final decision around the amount of their participation, but it could result in anywhere between $105 and $140 million in funding that could be used towards the infrastructure. So, and I will provide further updates.
Yes, so may I have a motion to receive the verbal update? Moved by Councillor Carruthers. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Anything else under this area? Members of committee, anything to raise? Thank you very much. I'll turn the chair back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We are now on item H, Engineering and Public Works, with myself in the chair. So we have two items today in Engineering and Public Works. And the first item is with regard to a Recreation and Culture Report, EPW 2024-05, Assumption of Minto Southwest Queensville Phase 1B Development Subdivision 19T-09002. Can I please have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Crone. And the report is moved by Councillor Crone. General Manager Molinari, do you have any comments to make?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. This is a standard and administrative assumption report to assume 27-lot development on the east side of on the east side of Second Concession, south of Don Road. Most of the development was assumed as part of Phase 1A in 2020. And the Phase 1B works that are listed in this report are very minor in nature, basically consisting of fronting boulevard, including some curb, sidewalk, sod, and some trees. So the works were completed in 2022. The 13-month maintenance period is now passed. The works have been inspected and are ready for assumption. So there are some minor deficiencies in the order of about $2,000. And PRC has retained some funds in order to cover that work. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, General Manager Molinari. Are there any questions or comments from members of committee on this item? No. Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented? Very good. The motion is carried. And item number 2. From also with regard to Recreation and Culture Report, EPW 2024-06, the assumption of Elderbank Phase 3A walkway block. Can I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Roy-DiClemente. And the report is moved by Councillor Roy-DiClemente. General Manager Molinari, do you have any comments on this item?
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, this is another standard administrative report to assume some infrastructure associated with one walkway block within the Sundial Phase 2 development, and that's located on the north side of Charles White Court and on the west side of Morel Boulevard in Sharon. So the walkway block includes some sidewalk, a retaining wall, and some fencing. The works, again, were completed in 2022. 13-month maintenance period has ended, and the works are ready for assumption. The works completed as part of the Phase 2 will be assumed at a later date. And PRC staff will be working with the developer on the trail system that will connect the walkway block to the larger trail system in the area. And happy to answer any questions.
Okay, excellent. That's great news. Are there any members of council committee who have questions? Councillor Johns?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to better understand this, so this releases their funds that they have sitting there as security?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, the security is related to the walkway block. It's a fairly nominal sum.
Yeah, and the proponents, the owners that's receiving the credit back, their name is?
That would be Sundial.
Sundial,
Or, sorry, that would be Elder Bank. Yeah.
owned by Sundial?
I'm not certain of the ownership of that. Do you know?
Elder Bank Investments Phase 3A walkway block is located on the north side of Charles White Court within the Sundial Sharon Limited Phase 2 development. I'm going to vote no in this motion for reasons that maybe members of committee will understand. However, if they wish to vote, go ahead, but I'm going to be voting no.
Are there any other committee members who have questions or need clarification on any matter with regard to this item? Seeing none, we will move forward with a vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented? So can I see everybody's hands clearly, please? 1, 2, 3, 4. So the motion is carried. And then I now have, we'll move on to ask General.
Could I?
Are there any opposed? Yes, thank you. I missed that step. There are 2 opposed. Noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, but the motion is carried. Thank you very much. We will now move on to ask General Manager, members of committee, if there are any further questions in this section of the agenda. Any other general questions? I have one for General Manager Molinari, because we've established that it's spring, and with spring comes mosquitoes. And last night I got bit for the first time by a mosquito. So I'm wondering if you could give us an update on the mosquito situation, please.
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair. Actually, I have a couple updates for today. So we'll start with our mosquito control contractor is actually monitoring conditions at this time. We expect that conditions will be favorable for that program to commence within the week. So it's either going to be this week or early next when we'll start seeing some of the helicopter administering some of the pellets to address some of the mosquito control. Also, for Council's information, the spring street sweeping program started this week. Started in Sharon. It'll be continuing on across the town, finishing up in Mount Albert. Expect that to be complete by the end of next week. And finally, April 20th, which is coming up just around the corner, is the start of yard waste collection. So just a couple of updates for Council's information.
Just in time for our Earth Day celebrations. So thank you very much for those updates. And I would just further like to ask if there's coordination taking place with the communications department, because every year we receive questions about those helicopters in the sky and what they're doing, and so that there will be a timely advertisement alerting residents to the fact that the mosquito spraying will begin soon.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. We've been working closely with communications to get that word out.
Thank you very much. Okay, and so, yes, Councillor Roy-DiClemente, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up on some of that community cleanup aspect. We're seeing social media posts about people who have been depositing bags of garbage, particularly along Morel and other areas that are still under development. If residents call in, are there staff on duty who can clean up some of that stuff? I'm not suggesting about, a cup of coffee here and there, but this is kind of a collection where it's kind of accumulated over the winter. Are there staff available to do that? And if so, do we just tell residents to call customer service?
Through you, Madam Chair, we would assess the area and see how big of a cleanup it is. It's a very labor-intensive process to clean up a large area like that. So we have staff that can do some of the smaller areas. On a larger scale, that would be something that we would likely need some help with, and that may be something that Earth Day and others would help to help clean up, or have some sort of community cleanup campaign to do some of that. But we'll have a look at the area, and if our staff can handle that, we will. And if not, we'll see what we can do to expand that out to
Either that
get
or the
resources.
landowner, or the individual landowner on where the garbage sits. Okay, Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from General Manager Molinari before we move on to the next item on the agenda? Seeing none, thank you very much, General Manager Molinari. We look forward to all of the cleanup of our community this spring. And so we will move now on to item I, which is Finance, with Councillor Johns in the chair. Over to you, Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one item, and it's the Finance Report 2024-01, our Statement of Council Remuneration and Expenses for the year ending December 31st, 2023. And so looking for a mover for this to get this tabled. Councillor Roy-DiClemente, thank you very much. I see some folks sitting in the audience from Finance, wondering if Mr. Marshall wants to take it away, and then I guess any comments from there.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. This is a report that's required annually under the Municipal Act, and it's a report that outlines the remuneration of council and discretionary expenses that have been incurred for the year. All expenses were under budget for the year, and I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the report.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we have the motion moved through Councillor Roy-DiClemente. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Mr. Marshall, do you have anything else that you wanted to bring forward today?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing at this time.
Thank you. Any members of committee have anything further that they would like to speak to? Seeing none, we will turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johns. Seeing no items listed under J through O on the agenda, we will move to item P, which is adjournment. Can I have a mover, be it for the adjournment? Councillor Crone, thank you. Be it resolved that the meeting of the Committee of the Whole Council adjourn at 11:16 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone. We will return at 2 p.m. for our Municipal Council meeting. Oh, yes, we have to have a vote on it, yes. So do you approve? Oh, I'm sorry, I did not see. Janice Ingram, our town solicitor, is joining us virtually. Janice, would you like to speak, please, now?
Yes, through you, Acting Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity. Just wanted to confirm with Council that Tara Lajavardi is absent with notice. Tara unfortunately had a very bad slip and fall and is under doctor's care right now. So her return to work is not known at this time, but we will keep you updated. And we wish her all the best in her recovery.
Oh, yes, indeed. Thank you very much for informing us of that, and we wish our clerk a very speedy recovery. And so we have the resolution to close the meeting now. It's been moved by Councillor Crone. So be it resolved that the meeting of Committee of the Whole Council adjourn at, adjourn at 11:17 p.m. Officially. And thank you. We will return at 2 p.m. for our Municipal Council meeting. Thank you very much to everyone. Oh, we have to vote for it. Okay. Oh, sorry. What time did I? Oh, sorry. Yeah, 11:17 a.m. Thank you very much. So can we vote on adjourning this portion of the council meetings? Yes, thank you very much. Everybody, okay, all in favor. So the motion is carried, and we will return at 2 p.m. for our municipal council meeting. Thank you. Yeah.